Hey there, everybody. Welcome to our Shrinking Season 1, Episode 2 reaction interview. This is an episode titled Fortress of Solitude,
Mhm.
something that we all need in life, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so my Fortress of Solitude, and you guys can all share in the comments what your Fortresses of Solitude are. Mine is a 2 foot radius all around the couch. The TV is right here. I can just immerse myself in old Final Fantasy games that, I don't know how many other people care about, but that's fine. I've got them. I can just transport myself to other worlds.
My fortress of solitude is this huge, big, comfy chair that I have in my room with my pile of books.
You know what Paul's Fortress of Solitude is?
His whole
Yeah,
place.
you have a big
Don't
fortress.
come over.
No, ain't nobody get to know about my place. Okay, Paul was entertaining. Like, this show is very, very fun. It's a great thing to get into with all of you guys. I think
Yeah.
through the introduction of Shrinking, we are still kind of in the spot in episode 2 where we're getting to know all the characters. Like, there
Mhm.
are these fun, sort of quirky moments where we're still figuring everybody out. Like, this episode in particular is a real introduction to Brian. Like, there are some things that the show does have to work out. Like, it's kind of got to go through its own sort of TV therapy and correct some issues that hopefully it will throughout the season.
I mean, that's how it is with a lot of first seasons. You have a really great premiere, then
Yeah.
you have a little bit of a sort of stumbling, figuring out, get your footing. There were some problems in this episode. But that being said, this show is still very good. It is still bringing the laughs. It is still sort of bringing Jimmy's journey of what is going on, what's going on with his daughter, how he's trying to fit back in. He's trying to make things right, kind of. He's not all the way there yet. And where Gabby and Paul and Liz all sort of fit in as well when it comes to the Alice character.
We also got a forced visit to a coffee shop. Who doesn't love a forced visit to a coffee shop, everybody?
I could go to a coffee
Yeah,
shop. Hey, Jimmy, you want to take me to a
yeah,
coffee shop? I have no problem anybody asking me how my day is.
yeah.
It is fine. I'm at a coffee shop. I'm getting someone else to make my coffee for me. Let's go.
This guy. I do not even remember this guy. It's just this guy.
Dan.
Dan. Listen, Dan, you better enjoy that. I don't know why I'm threatening Dan. Okay, well, we're going to get into everything here, but but before we do move forward, go ahead, join our Patreon. We have a link for that in the description
Yep.
below. Every Tuesday over there, Jess and I, we are there talking about all things TV and a live stream.
Yep.
We would love for you guys to come be a part of that. Have a good time with us. It's been a real blast doing these live streams, and just all you got to do is join our Patreon to be a part of it.
Yeah, thank you so much to everyone who has joined our Patreon. It really helps us here at the channel to continue to make videos.
Okay, so I'll just start with just a little funny thing that I love early on in this episode. I'm doing my Dracula voice. It's basically Jason Segel was just like, I want to bring back Dracula the musical from Forgetting Sarah Marshall for just like 2 seconds at the start of this episode. Of not going to really acknowledge this Dracula thing ever again. We're just going to move right forward.
Listen, it was a pretty good impression. I knew exactly what was happening as soon as he was due. I love that movie so much. That Dracula, so good. Gary Oldman was an amazing Dracula. That's actually the book that I am reading right now. It's Dracula. We just talked about our little fortresses of solitude. I'm reading Dracula right now.
No, I really still, I love the Jimmy character. Jimmy is really still, I love Harrison Ford. He's great. Jessica Williams, who plays Gaby, is great, but it's still like, Siegel remains one of my favorite actors. And I think while the show kind of experiences some early growing pains, the fact that we
Mhm.
have like such a deeply flawed guy at the center of all of this, who I think in his heart wants to do well. Like, I mean, his job is trying to help other people.
Yeah, here's the thing. I mean, the whole idea of the show is Jimmy is trying to get over the death of his wife to be able to then reconnect with his child. It's been a year since this has happened, and he has pushed everyone out of his life. His best friend Brian gone because
Yeah.
he's too positive about how great everything
Yeah.
in his life is. And I I totally get that when he was just like, listen, my wife had just died and you're going on about how great your life is. Like, it's not that easy for me to hear. Yeah, I get it. But he also has pulled away from his daughter. And that's really a lot of what is going on here in this episode, too. And all right, everybody put on your hard
All
hat.
right, all right.
Here's a bit of my beef with this episode is that all the adults here feel like, except for Liz, are trying to make Alice also an adult in this situation. And she's still a kid. She's like, what, 16 years old? Like, she's still a child. She's a child. Her mother has died. Her father is off drinking, women, drugs, all kinds of nonsense that's going on. He has completely abandoned her at that point for a good long time. The only person in her life that she has been able to really lean on is Liz, this neighbor who has stepped up. You know, she's a bit of an empty nester herself, but it's worked out that she's like, hey, this, kid needs some help. I can help. I'm right next door, until Jimmy can get it together. Like, I'm gonna help. And thank God Liz was there, because if she didn't have Liz, Alice would have had nobody.
Yeah.
And she's been able seemingly to be somewhat well adjusted through losing her mom, through basically losing her dad, because she's had an adult step in. So when we get to this whole thing where Jimmy's like, yeah, Liz is too involved. I need to be involved. She needs to back out. And Gabby's like, yeah, I'll go over and talk to her. And then has this talk with her where she's basically like, Jimmy can't step in if you don't step out. I was like, what? What are you talking about? People have, growing up, all kinds of people that are adults in your life, whether you have tragedy or not. You have, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, another grandma, grandpa, stepmom,
Yeah.
stepdad, possibly two sets of stepmoms and stepdads. There's always people around you as a support system, and one doesn't take away from the other. Jimmy not stepping into his role as the dad has nothing to do with the fact that Liz has stepped up into the role to help Alice through this. So watching Gabby basically be like, you need to be out so Jimmy can get in, I was just like, okay, well, what if Jimmy doesn't actually get in? You're taking away Alice's only adult figure that's here to help her. Like, how does that help the child?
So there's so much going on in a lot of these
Sorry, that was a
relationships.
long rant, guys.
It's okay. We are all about the long rants, and here's the thing with Jimmy. Jimmy is, I don't want to say he's selfish, but I think he's trying to convince himself that, like, I've got this. I can figure this out. I can be a good dad. He's gonna just like flip a switch and it's all gonna be better. So like it's not surprising to me that all of a sudden he's gonna like have this insecurity and be like, I need to take over this. Liz needs to step out because he wants to, be the dad. He's upset that she knows things that he doesn't. But Gabby, Gabby, you don't need to be this involved. And I think this is one of the things that I think this show is trying to work itself out in the early parts of it, is that it's a very sort of like insular world where you've got like 5 or 6 main characters. They're all like interacting with each other, and it feels a lot like the writers are trying to like find a way to get each character to have something going on with each other character. And there could have been a different way for Gabby to go about some of this with Liz. Because even Gabby seemed to know while she was doing this that it's awkward. Like, she comes over with this whole excuse of like, oh, I'm bringing this basketball or whatever else. It's just like, who does that? Why don't you just give it to Jimmy at work?
Yeah, and it feels like, Gabby is the godmother of Alice, but her priority is Jimmy, and that Jimmy is able to have a chance to get closer to Alice again. But Liz is not actually stopping that from happening at all. Jimmy is stopping that from happening. And, Alice is closed down a little bit, but we saw her opening up in this episode as well. I mean, what's going to get really awkward here by the end of this season, and I could be wrong, but I think that Gabby's going to end up being the love interest, where I'm just kind of like, okay, she's the godmother, so she was very close to Jimmy's wife, who is now gone.
Hmm.
It's just like that means that she's also close to Alice. Like, it's such a weird mess that even Liz is like, I heard you talking, smack about me with Tia before, where you guys are like, oh, she's such a mom. And she's like, well, you are a mom. You didn't mean it as a nice thing. You were being
Hmm.
really insulting to me. So we know that Gabby was really, really close with Jimmy's wife.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a strange situation, and she really shouldn't have put herself in it that way. Jimmy needed to have that conversation with Liz, or Jimmy just needs to step up.
People in this show cannot get out of their own way, and that is both a good thing and a bad thing. It's interesting. It's interesting to watch people make decisions that feel objectively just like bad decisions, and Jimmy has made plenty of them over the course of just a couple of episodes, and it's kind of remarkable in a way how he still even has a job at this point. Like the hardest thing, and once again, I am usually somebody who can just sort of tune out things that are unrealistic or whatever. I go with the flow pretty well, but I'm like really surprised after episode 2 that Jimmy still has a career after everything that happened with Sean and the soccer game. He's still figuring that out. I did love the fact though he was lying to Paul about being at the donut stop, and then after his Paul's just like, well, now I want a donut, and he can't even have the donut. But he's creating a huge mess for himself, just like immediately, and it's just surprising that like he's still moving forward, even when Brian interrupts one of his clients in the middle of a session.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see that there are still sort of no consequences to what he did. I mean, Brian came in, sort of saved the day with Sean, even though he's an estate lawyer, that he was able to sort of save the day, but not all the way through. I mean, Sean ends up getting kicked out of his place,
Yeah.
and without talking to Alice about it, just has Sean at the house. And it's sort of, again, like, you're going to then take away this Liz character, this
Yeah.
person who is Alice's support, so that Jimmy can, step up for Alice, but not really, because they're not even having a conversation to be like, oh, I'm bringing this guy to stay here. It's kind of like, okay, but you both live in the house. You need to have that conversation. You can't just bring somebody in.
This is all so messy. Like this show is so messy in so many different ways that at times you wonder, does all this make sense? But at other times I'm just like, bring me the mess. Just like I will surround myself in the mess. I'm gonna have a 1-minute discussion here about pickleball, which is apparently what we saw Brian and Jimmy engage
The
in.
nation's fastest growing sport.
Apparently. Have you ever been excited to even think about playing pickleball?
No.
Okay.
Do I look like an athlete?
Well,
to
do
you?
I look
Somebody
like
who
an
looks like they
athlete?
want to play something? No.
I have played tennis before.
I just said that I don't leave the house.
Okay, I have played tennis. I feel like if you put me in like give me a headband, you give me like a neon tank top or like something like that.
Has to be neon.
That's how you look cool, everybody. You put on a neon tank top and you go out and you play I feel like I could be pretty good at pickleball. I feel
I
like
think you could be.
I would be dead in like 2 minutes because I have no stamina. For those first 2 minutes, watch out.
You do a lot of walking. I think you would do all
See-
right at it. I don't leave my house. So, going up and down the stairs is a workout for me.
I love that pickleball is the sport here though, because it really does feel like, there's even jokes about it in the episode, but this is
Yeah, where Alice feels like her dad didn't want to have dinner with her and made up a reason of this pretend sport.
it is the most like hipster elitist sort of thing that like of course people with successful careers would go and do because they're not athletic enough to play something that is more strenuous than this. I felt like the writing on that part of it was really good. I feel like you mentioned it a little bit already about why things were falling apart with Brian and with Jimmy, and I like the show exploring that aspect of not just male friendship, but just like
Mhm.
friendship in general of like why friendships can fall apart. Is there a way to rebuild them? Because it is kind of a classic TV trope that everything between friends is always like hunky dory. If there's ever a conflict on a show, it's usually between like love interests. It's not usually between friends.
And if there is a conflict between friends, it's never this. This is
Yeah.
the first time I have ever seen on any show them actually talk about this. And this is a very real thing that does happen where it's like you're going through something tragic, something difficult that you can't really handle. And you have that one friend that's like, don't worry, everything is great. It's going to be cool. You know, my life's awesome. Everything's awesome. And it's like you just can't handle it. Sometimes you just need to feel what you're
Yeah.
going to feel and not have somebody be like, don't worry, we're getting to the other side. It's just like, stop. Like, you know, my wife just died.
Yeah.
I'm going to feel sad about it. I don't want to hear about how great things are for you or how the great things are in general. Like, my wife is dead.
One of the other sort of things, I was open about this in the premiere. Like I've seen all of Shrinking season 1, but I'm putting myself in a position that of watching it for the first time here. So at coming out of episode 2, one of the things that I'm the most curious about is about Paul, because they've spent all this time sort of establishing he has a fortress of solitude. He doesn't want a lot of people to know a lot about, what he does outside of work, some of his hobbies, some of his activities. And
I understand you, Paul.
I do
I don't know why he's doing that, but I understand. I
like
am that way as well. Don't come to my house and I'm not leaving.
I I understand it. I just want to know, this show likes to dive into the why with people. And, this is a great opportunity for Harrison Ford as an actor to do something other than like, pull out either a gun or a whip or something else that he is using in action movies. It's
Mhm.
like it's a chance to really dive in to this character and sort of better understand why he is the way that he is. Like he's clearly really successful as a therapist. It seems like he's kind of like, the person really in charge of this practice.
Mhm.
But it's sort of like, how are you maintaining this while at the same time, like, not really letting anybody get to know you? Why do they want to stay around you? I mean, is it because you're professional? Is it because you're seemingly nice enough? Clearly you are willing to put up with a certain level of nonsense because you are with Jimmy.
Yeah, I haven't seen the show, so going forward, I don't know why Paul is as private as he is, if he's just a guy who wants to keep his work and private life separate. I mean, there's lots of people that are like that. We
Yeah.
saw he's been having conversations with Alice, which is, nice to know that there's someone else there that she can speak to, not as a therapist, but just as another adult that's there to kind of help her look at things in a bit of a different way or help open up a little bit to Jimmy, or if she just needs a place to show up with chicken to be like, my dad doesn't know where you live, but I do for some reason. That we did see her kind of try to look through some of his stuff, look at pictures
Yeah.
or whatever, and him be like, don't.
Yeah.
So there is something a bit deeper there that he is keeping to himself. It's just, what is it?
Why are you making her watch the Lakers, Paul? Nobody doesn't want to watch the
Oh my
Lakers. That's
goodness.
your big problem here. No, I think Paul, once again, he kind of puts himself on this sort of elevated plane. This, don't come to my house. I have a very specific set of rules. But you are talking to Jimmy's daughter, and you don't want Jimmy to know about it because you know he is like going to be really insecure.
Mhm.
You are stepping in it too, Paul. You are not immune to any of this, and that is really fascinating to me.
Yeah, for me, we have three therapists
Yeah.
that are all sort of in this weird spot with Alice where it is very weird where Jimmy's like, yeah, I want to be the dad, but I'm gonna choose to go to pickleball first anyways, even though Alice is like, no, this isn't for you, go do whatever your made up sport is. He's not there for her. Then you've got Gaby, who's a therapist who's like taking away the one adult person that Alice has.
Yeah.
And then you have Paul, who's trying to help a little bit, but is doing it behind Jimmy's back instead of being like, she can have a whole group of adults around her to help her through it. She's just a kid. Like, it'll be okay. You don't need to be threatened by me. I'm not trying to be your dad. I'm just Paul.
It's such a good question of like, is this show advocating for therapy or going and seeing therapists,
Right.
or is this show just like, I think it's really,
Yeah, that all your therapists have their own problems.
yeah, it's like, they may be good at some things, but they are just as messed up as everybody else. And like just in 2 episodes, like this is articulated so well where they're all doing things that from the outside, it's just like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, why would all of you do this when it's like you said, they could all just come together. Alice would have more love and care than like she would know what to
Yes.
do with. And it's just
And
like,
it would help Jimmy too.
yeah,
Like having more people around him. Like he's made himself into his own sort of fortress of solitude with his booze and his Santa cop. And, he's been called out for it, that it's like, you're also pushing everyone away. You haven't spoke to Brian in a year. You're not really speaking to your daughter. You're not really speaking to anybody. Like, as therapists, how is everybody then not coming together to be like, okay, we're all going to come together and help you now?
we are set up for a really fun, really interesting, and really complicated rest of this season. The
Yeah.
fact that everybody is already like stepping in it so much at this point, they got a lot to clean off, if you catch my drift.
So every Thursday and every Sunday, we are
Yeah.
going to have an episode up of Shrinking. We're also doing the same thing with the bear.
Yes.
So if you have watched it or haven't watched it, we're doing the same thing. Every Thursday, every Sunday, there will be a new episode up.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you to all of our patrons. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate your support, and we will see you here next time.